Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome once again back to our club channel. It's great to see so many people already here and watching already. Well, you wasn't watching, not until now. I'll just click myself out there so that you can see me in the bottom right-hand corner. Brian's screen is up here already, so we're just looking at the backdrop of his screen. So a few hellos. Jill was first. Well, I say first as usual. Richard was very close behind. As I mentioned in my email earlier in the week, don't forget to have a notepad handy and of course a pen, so that if you want to jot any little notes down, just as reminders of where things are and what's happening, then you'll have it all there to do so. I'm just looking at the bits of notes here. Who else have we got? Vera, good evening Vera, and Chris P is with us as well this evening, so welcome to those. Graham H, usually my my person who just lets me know everything's coming through okay. Jill, good evening Jill Pardo. Who else? Gail, good evening Gail. I will get your picture done, honest, in the next day or two. So who else going down? Alan, good evening Alan. A good win last week. Did well, so well done to you. Good evening Neil, Doreen, Jim, good evening to you. And where are we down the line? Caroline and Dave, good evening to you. Michael Hudston, good evening. Who else have we got? Keith, good evening Keith. Really pleased to see you on here. Hope that everyone just learns a little bit this evening. So who else is next? Mark, good evening Mark, and Ray. Ray, I think you're the only one I'm waiting for the pictures for the committee night that we're showing, so don't forget to get your images in. I'm one down anyway. I know I'm two down. I ain't done mine yet neither. Good evening Peter. Yeah, all okay. Good evening Bob. Hope you got everything sorted with the line today, and now you can hear us and see us twice as fast as what you ever could do before. So yeah, tonight we as you all know, we've got Brian with us, so I'll hand over to Brian in a short while. But I'm just going to wait till 7 just to make sure that as many people are on. I've only got one little notice tonight, and I'm just thinking about it. Oops, my seat's just gone down on its own accord. I'm on the floor.
I can't see.
I'm nearly on the floor.
I missed that.
I'm back up now. I'm just going to switch my phone off, otherwise it'll be tinging if anybody comes on. So let me just get rid of everything. Come on. Right, that's quietened it down. Right, we're up to 1 minute 2, so I'll just say this one notice that we've got for this evening. Don't forget that the President's Challenge, which is my challenge for the year, ends tonight. So we've now, it'll be closing tonight. So if you haven't done so already, make sure that you get your entries into Dropbox, into the relevant folder, and Jill will be able to then collate them and put them all into the proper place. So she'll get them all ready for me. Once they're all ready, as with all competitions, she'll send them across to me, and we'll be able to get that underway for whatever night it is. I must admit I haven't got anything in front of me for the night, but yeah, tonight is the final night for your entries for the President's Challenge. So just one more that's popped up whilst I've been talking. Good evening, Viv. So right, we're at 7 o'clock. If there's any more things that you can think of, Jill, that I was supposed to have mentioned, or any of the committee members, just jot it down so that people can see it in the chat on YouTube. Right, well, we're going to move over to Brian now, and once again, a great big thank you to Brian for coming along again this evening and entertaining us. Well, he hasn't had to come along, actually, because he's still sat at his house, but you know what I mean. So what Brian's going to do this evening, and he'll explain a little bit further, but he's going to show us a few pictures, show us his method of getting to where he wants to be for either a competition or for showing a picture, social media, etc. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Brian. You're not going to see him in this first instance because he's got his screen up ready to go. He's raring to go, so I'll hand you over to Brian. Over to you, sir.
Hi there, everybody. Nice to be back with you again. Hopefully we're going to learn something tonight between us. First of all, I would like to sort of warn you that my screen layout is not what you would call a standard screen layout. If you look at the top here, for instance, on the right-hand side, I only have library, develop and print available to me. All the other bits I've crossed out because I don't use them often enough or at all. So what I've done is I've gone into this area here by just right-clicking in that banner across the top there. I can select the bits that I want to see. So if I want to add in slideshow, for instance, that I just click there and it's there now. So I will click back and just get rid of it. So I've only, as you can see, I've got the library, the develop and the print section, which, being honest with you, that's about all I do. Oops, sorry about that. Just let me close that down. I'll stop that with a bit of luck. Okay, and I'll close that down. Oh, no, but not. I'll leave that. Okay, so I've got only 3 up here. The other thing is, you'll find that when we start working, that this area on the right-hand side may not be in the sequence in which you're used to seeing it. And I'll explain a bit like that when I go into develop. The other thing I do is I only have one open. So if you notice, when I click on any of these down arrows to get whatever's in that area, everything else closes down. So if I click on collections, everything else just closes it down. I'm in what they call solo mode. And again, by clicking on there, you'll see I've selected solo mode. Okay, so that's a couple of things that I've done. And over this side, it's a similar sort of thing. It'll only allow me to have one open at a time, which I find quite useful. Otherwise, it's a case of scrolling through the damn things all the time. When you come to to develop rather, you'll find that I've remove some of the elements and I've also shuffled them around, and I'll show you how you can do that in case you choose to go that way round anyway. So I've been out in the garden this morning, just taken a few snaps to sort of give us something to work with. I think I'll start with this one down here. This is a photograph of some Xanias I've taken this morning. I've been using a 7D Mark I with a 150 Sigma macro lens on it to play about with. Somebody's loaned me the macro lens, so I thought I'd better make use of it. I don't hold these up as great photographs. All I've done is taken some photographs for the sake of using them as things to process. So the first thing you'll notice here is that on the right hand side I've got this quick develop section here, and normally you would probably find that set at default settings there. And did you notice the image change? If you watch the image, I changed that. And underneath that, I have some of my user presets. And what I've got down there is the Canon 7D preset. So if I click on that, it's changed the image straight away. And that's done a bit of basic processing. So if we go from defaults there, default settings there, lifeless, to going to my presets for 7D, that's slammed it up straight away. And that I don't always do that. I'm supposed to, but I don't always remember. So, but that is a good thing to be able to set up. I'm not going to show you how to set that up tonight, but That's something that you can do. Here, this wasn't actually taken in daylight. It was cloud. I think it was cloudy at the time, so I just changed that to cloudy. And then when I come into my develop section, that's all been processed for me. And if we look at the top here under basic, you'll see that all the settings have been basically sorted out for me already. So that's my basic image. Not a particularly good one, as I say. It's just me using an image as a starting point. So what have we got set up down here? First of all, if I click on the lens corrections, you'll see it's already set that up for me. That was in that 7D thing. That's done inside the 7D bit here. That's all been set up there. So if we go back into here now, that's all been set up for me straight away. I don't have to click on that. But that would be where I start in lens corrections. I always start up there, sort out the lens corrections, see what's going on. I tend to, hopefully it's going to be one of these. Sometimes it isn't. I will give you one slight warning with this. If you do use the lens correction, if you use it with something like a Tokina fisheye lens, the 1014, and you click those, you'll find it straightens it out. Defeats the whole object in the fisheye lens. So just be a little bit wary of that one. Anyway, that's the first thing I would do. Is then I would go into basic, and normally I would set everything I want in here. I've changed my mind from camera standard to that point. I now use Adobe Color, and if you notice, there's a little bit of a change there. If we go back and Control Z, a little bit of a change in the colors. I've decided I prefer to use Adobe Color. So that's my default these days.
Could I just interrupt there, Brian, please?
Yep.
There's always a big debate upon this sRGB, and Adobe Color.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you use one against the other?
Just my preference, that's all. I like what it does. So which one are you trying to use? I mean, you're using the...
I tend to use personally the sRGB because with me having the large format printer, I know that it prints CMYK, and the sRGB and CMYK link together. I know I'll have gone over the top of the head of one or two of the people watching, but hence the reason I use sRGB.
I don't quite know what you're talking about when you say sRGB. Where's that?
Well, the sRGB is the only difference that the S stands for is the standard, the latest standard. RGB was brought out first, and then, and I forget what year it was, the world decided that they would bring out a new one, sRGB, and on cameras you can take pictures in Adobe sRGB or RGB.
Right, now you're talking about colour space then?
Yes, indeed.
Right, well this isn't colour space.
Right, so
this is just a colour profile. Now my camera is set to Adobe RGB, but being honest with you, it doesn't matter what the hell it's set to, because once I move into camera raw, it's not going to have any effect at all.
Right.
It only affects the preview on the rear screen. So if you've got Adobe RGB set, then the image you see on your rear screen will be converted for Adobe from raw. So it's gone from 14-bit down to whatever the bit space is for sRGB. I think it's still only 8-bit. So you've actually thrown a lot of the data away. That's why I stick in RAW. So if you look here, I'm using my CR2 image, which is the RAW image.
Yep.
I'm actually processing that. Now the Adobe RGB, sRGB doesn't come into play as far as I'm concerned until I go to my output point of view, which is the export at the end of the session, which I would then, if I was exporting for this screen, I would go into sRGB. And if I was exporting for a printer, I'd probably go into Adobe RGB. Or if I can get further, if I can get more beyond there, then I would do so. I mean, I work in RAW because I'm trying to future-proof my images. As and when better printers come along, I can change it to a new space.
Yep.
Technically speaking, I'm working outside the space.
Yep. No, that's fair. That's fair comment. Yep. Thanks very much.
Okay, is that clear
Yep.
enough? I mean, hopefully, if anybody wants to talk more about that, it'd be busking it, but yeah.
No, thanks very much.
Yeah, okay, so this is where I start in here. And being honest with you, when I've looked at that, I like to see this triangle here lit, because that's showing there is some blacks. What I will normally do with that is just consider the black slide and just move it forward a bit until it goes out of that. Now that means I've got blacks in the blue colour. That's been done. That means I've got black in the blue and the red. And if I go to white, then I've got a full black in the image somewhere. I like to have a full black. What I don't like is if I use the white slider, if I rotate this one far enough, then the triangle on the right hand side will. That means there I'm over processed in every colour. Now I will take that one back inevitably until I get no triangle there at all. And sometimes I'll take it back beyond there because I do not want any pure white, because that's basically blank paper. So I will lose that to try and keep it out of that triangle. So whatever's going on here I'm quite happy with in this particular instance, but I don't want that one lit if I can avoid it, unless there are some other reasons for that being lit. So I'm quite happy with that as it stands, just as a basic processed image. There are other things I could do there. We'll have a look down the next thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just to look at this one here. The transform one, this is where I would have sorted out any uprights, possibly. Certainly verticals, I would always try this here, but I'll come across an image where it's worth trying, and I'll show you why I use it sometimes and why I don't others. It's always there ready for me to do. Then I've got the detail section here. Now I tend to, that defaults to 40 these days. I'm not too fussed about that. That'll be fine. That's near enough for me. That's an overall sharpening. I just leave that to default. No noise reduction, because I shouldn't be needing it with this what I'm working with. This is an area that I do like to use. I will take, say, for instance, I might just decide that the saturation on the yellows is just a bit heavy, so I might just click on that and then pull the saturation down a little bit on those. But that would be probably done later rather than now, because what I would normally do at this point in time, these down here, sorry, I don't use these, so what I will do is I'll right click in there and I'll can I remember how to do this? Customize develop panel. Now I do not want to see split toning, tone curve and calibration. So I'm now going to save that, and notice that list now has been shortened. And I did say I could turn it around. If I do it again, customize it, if I wanted to move the detail up to transform, I should be able to just click on that and move it to the and I've now just dragged it above the hue saturation color. So I've got lens, basic, detail, transform, which is probably a better way of working. I tell me I've got to relaunch. I'm going to relaunch later. But it won't show it in the right sequence until I do that relaunch. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as it is, but that's how you do it. And be quite honest with you, if you're not going to use these other bits, why leave them on the screen? As long as you remember they're there in the future, that's all that really matters. So once I've got this far with my image, I tend to sort of skip off into Photoshop next. So I'm going to go into Photoshop. Now when I go into Photoshop, because of the way I'm going to process in Photoshop, I will always transfer as a smart object. I know it means files are bigger and so on, but it has other benefits which are useful. So I'm going to clear off into Photoshop and create a smart image.
Just whilst, it's done it. I was going to say, just whilst it's doing that, what is, and I've never used smart objects really, what is the difference between a normal image and a smart object? Is it literally that it's a larger file?
Not necessarily. It has certain functions that are better. The first one is that if you crop an image and enlarge it, you lose absolutely no detail. If it isn't a smart image and you crop it and you enlarge it, it goes pixelated.
All right. Yep.
So there's one real benefit straight away.
Yeah. Big. Yeah.
Really big. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Now, what the other thing is, this will, when I'm going to now apply an action, and once you've done that, if you haven't got a smart object, you don't have access to the layers within the action. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense again?
It does to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to apply this. This is my next move, is just to go to this one, my list of actions. I've got one called simple processing, which I just click on. I just let it do all this, and at the end of that, I'll show you what it's done.
Can you just explain to the members what an action is?
Right, an action is me recording a number of steps that I performed on a function, on an image. And once I've recorded that action, I can save the list of things to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I'll show you in a moment. I'll click on this action here. I'll change it from the style I'm using it in, because this is a different style. Normally you don't see it like that necessarily. If I go to click off button mode, now if we find that thing here, that's where is it? Simple processing, just down the bottom here. Then you can see it's applying define to, and it's also applying color effects. And that's the two jobs it's going to do. Whatever image comes through, it's going to do those. All these are other things that will do different. So here I've got a duplicate a layer, apply it on one, something. Are you with me? I've got loads of things happening in that one. Yeah. But whenever I apply it, it will always apply the same things to do the image in the same sequence.
Yep. Now,
so,
as I say, I use some very simple actions like your one that you've just done.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
I just wanted the members to see how it processed.
Right, okay, so now then, I've done it on this image, and if I just click there, whoops, no, not there, here, you can see there's very minimal difference. You've got to be look in the background at the bricks, the changing tones. But that's my what I've done there. Now, what is the bonus here is, if I click on this layer here, double click on that layer, the color effects layer, it will take me back into Nick Color Effects. I can see exactly what I've done to that layer, because Nick Effects is applying multiple filters as it goes.
If I remember hearing you right, one of the members has just said, how do you create an action? You just said you was going to show us, did you?
No, but I will.
Oh, right, sorry. Yes, so Caroline...
Yes, that's no problem.
Caroline's just said, how do you create an action?
Now, you can't do it in Elements, but you can load an action into Elements that somebody else has created and run it from there, but you can't actually do it in Elements. So anyway, this is what I've done in Color Effect. I've applied 3 filters on the right hand side here. I've applied the Brilliance filter, and what I've done is just added a little bit of saturation to the image, and you can hardly see what's going on. You've got to be looking. I think if you look at if I turn everything else off, that's where I came in, and that's where I came in, nothing applied. If you look at the image while I just clicked it, did you see it just brighten up a little bit? Just changing the petal colours very slightly?
Just a touch, yeah.
That's all it is, just a little bit there. I don't hammer any of these. This is going to be the detail extractor. I click on that. Now that does affect things a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right, it's bringing a lot more. If you look in the foliage, for instance, it's bringing a lot more sharpness into the foliage, which is something I tend to use quite a lot. Then I've got this glamour glow, and that's just going to it just adds a bit of a glow to the image. If we look inside that here, these are the values I'm using. So I've got 27% glow, some removal, some saturation, and I'm not adding any glow warmth at all. Now these are all things that you've got to play about with in Nick Effects to find out what works for you. If you look down the left-hand side, there's so much in there. Most of it I don't use. This is the old Nick Effects, by the way. This is the original version of Nick Effects. And that's what I say. So the brilliance and warmth, I think that is basically how it does it normally. I'm not quite sure. We can try in a minute. Then there's the detail enhancer. Now this one here might have affected the background a lot. So the reason I want to be able to get back into here, I might want to take the detail enhancer out of the bricks, for instance. And so if I click on what they call control points here, this is a control point minus. Is to remove things. Now, if I click in that area there, can't remember which one this does. Think that's the filter applied, and that control point is now applied, and it's taken away that filter from that area.
Yep.
Can you see that?
Yep. Yep.
Now, the nice thing about this filter is if I click on this area here, I think, then you can see that that's created this mask, right? Which is not full black, so it's taken it away selectively. It's a very intelligent filter. So what I then do is I tend to hold the Alt key down because it's quicker. If I click on that thing after I hold the Alt key down, I can create a copy of it and move it across the top, and do another one until I just build up enough to take out the bits I don't want it to apply the filter to. I'll put another one down the side here. Now the flower's still getting the full benefit of it because they're full white. This area is getting some of it, but the areas where it's black is getting none of it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
You've got to play about in Nik Effects to get it to show all this information, but it is a very powerful program. Whoops. So what I'm going to do is close that down, if I can remember. Yeah, there we are. And then if I just click somewhere in here, let me just see where I could click, turn that down, turn that off, and that's the difference. So I think if I click on there, that's with the filter applied, that's with me removing certain areas.
Yep.
So it's a very intelligent filter, and one of the reasons that DxO wanted this software is for that control point technology, because it's very clever stuff.
Yeah. Very
clever stuff. Okay, so that's what's it saying there? It's telling me something. It's saying you're doing something silly. Can I see what it's telling me I'm doing silly? Can I ducks? Right, try it again. It's doing it this time. Now it's going to create all those filters again. So every time you sort of mess about with one of these things, it's going to take a small period of time, depending on the speed of your computer. But now that's changed. The foreground is now had that detail extractor applied to it, but it hasn't had the other elements applied to it, to the background. So that's a bonus thing, shall we say?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Graham.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, came through lovely. That did.
Is that understandable?
Oh yes, yes. It.
That's good. So basically, once I've done that, I go back into Photoshop, just close it down, and that will transfer it back into Photoshop. Now, when I go back into Photoshop, it will appear as a TIFF file. I use a TIFF file because it preserves the layers, and it also takes up less space than a PSD file, and the detail is left exactly the same. So that's my reason for doing so. And you'll notice here it's come back as a TIFF file. And if we go back into the library, then I've got two versions. I've got the original version here, and I've got the new version that's come back to me there. And I would then go back into develop, that's there. I tend to play about with it. I have a couple of things I tend to do with it, which is because we're talking about what I do rather than what I should do, I can do what I like. So I would go back into basic, and sometimes I'll apply just a little bit more yellow. It's only about 5. Now, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people sort of drag that around. That is diabolical. I use the wheel. The wheel will take it up. If I've clicked on there, using the wheel will take it up 5. So I can keep it fairly tight. If I want to get any more precise than that, I can click over here, and then I can sort of use the up and down arrow keys and go individual numbers. Does that make sense again?
Yep.
I don't. I tend to just say, okay, I want just a little bit more warmth in my image, and that's what I do that for. Then I tend to apply some texture, because texture. Why do I use texture rather than clarity? Well, texture is a bit like vibrance compared to saturation. Saturation's in your face, whereas vibrance is subtle. And the similar sort of thing with texture. If I reset that and I drag the clarity button, that is really harsh processing. Can you see that?
Yep.
So if I drag the texture button just as far, the processing is more subtle. Does that make sense?
It does indeed, sir.
So what I tend to do is I tend to give it twice as much texture as I do clarity, but I will also boost the vibrance just to give me that bit more. So that's my basic processing, except that, I mean, this is an awful image having looked at it. I will then always consider adding a vignette. So I just hover over this. I've got my vignette in the defaults. I've got my presets open over here, and over there I'll click on the vignetting. I just hover over each one and I watch what it does. So if you're watching the corners, as I move up and down, yeah. I won't have the one I won't say I'm always going to go to this one. I'll hover over all three of them and make my decision. I particularly like the heavy one on this one, so I've applied the heavy one. It's taking the corners, concentrating things. So that is basically the way I process things. So it either works or it doesn't. What I will do is I'll do it with a better image.
Can I just ask you a quick question there, Dane?
Yeah, of course you can.
Dane's just said, when you bring an image back into Lightroom, the image settings have reset, in other words, to what you've done to it elsewhere.
Yes.
Would you continue then to use Lightroom to do further manipulation to the image?
That's what I just did.
Yep.
So what I do is I do my basic manipulation. I then go into Photoshop and I do some more manipulation, which tends to be global global, but you see I can actually do it local as well by using the control points. Then I'll come back into Lightroom to do what I call finishing off, giving it the effect I want it to look at. And then that is me basically done. But let me just think, I'll get myself confused now. So also, important thing about Photoshop is Lightroom, I will not try and remove elements that need cloning or covering up at all in Lightroom. It is, in my opinion, completely unreliable. So I will always go into Photoshop to do any cloning or removing of objects, because that is where I feel more comfortable with doing it, and I think it does a damn sight better job. So that's something else I always go into Photoshop for. I also like to use it quite often for a certain amount of tweaking of verticals, shall we say. It depends on the scenario. We were talking earlier about a particular image. If I go into here and find that particular image, I know why. That's why. If it doesn't find an image you suspect it has done, perhaps you haven't got the whole of the all of your photographs selected. I've got 73,000 selected on this damn thing at the moment. Just one or two. Yeah. Now that's pulled it up. Now this is the image we were talking about earlier on. So this one here was the original. Unfortunately, I only took this one as a JPEG. It was taken a long time ago. So we're going to the develop states, and I'm not going to do too much. Now, can you see this blue area here?
Yep, showing
now
nicely.
That refers to this triangle here. If I click that off, it's gone. Now you want those two clicked on, so that they will show you. This one will show you where you've got any blacks that need handling. So if you then go to your blacks and just sort of move that forward, get rid of the blue. And if you've got any whites up here, then go to your white slider. You're going to use whites and highlights to get rid of that one. and you use blacks and shadows to get rid of this one if you need to.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I'm talking a lot, so there's a lot of things going in here, and it's just coming out. It's not organised.
Well, I must admit, we've already had a member say, will this be viewable after the event? Because
Yes. Because you'll need to make notes.
Yes, that's right. Another little question came in from your last picture, saying it was from Doreen, who said, do you always apply the vignette in presets rather than using it from the selection on the right hand side?
Since those two do exactly the same, the answer is probably yes.
Right.
But the answer is no, because I don't always do a preset that way round. My presets might sometimes be done with gradients. I might use the brush. It depends what I'm trying to create. If I'm just trying to stop you going into the corners, then I'll use a preset vignette. If I want to do a different trick, for instance, I've got an object with a shape to it, I want to fill certain areas darker than others, then I will use a different technique to get that vignette. I've also seen a technique that Jean Brumby showed me, where she doesn't use black for a vignette. She selects the colour that will be covered by that element of vignette and darkens it and uses a gradient over that corner in that colour. And that gives you a much more subtle way of doing it. So there's lots of ways of doing it, but that's the way I would choose here. Does anyone use on one?
I do, yeah, a little bit.
Right, well, on one, if you go into on one doing the vignette, you can change where the centre is.
Yes, yep.
Now that's a very good dodge. So if you've got an offset subject, you can set the centre over the subject, and it will then apply the vignette within that, based around that centre.
Yeah.
So there's different programs for different jobs. Does that make sense again?
It does
and
indeed.
Then there's all the different ways you can do it, which people will show you. You will, if you go on YouTube, you'll find 20 ways of adding vignettes or something silly, and you use whichever one applies to you. The thing I would caution against is going too heavy. Quite often people do it and it looks like there's lenses got corners missing. Does that make sense again? Yep. Just take it subtly rather than giving it too much hammer. Anyway, I was going to talk about changing the verticals on this one. You can do it in we can do it here under transform. If I just click vertical on this, that should handle it. But then it's actually not done too bad a job now. It depends what it's going to do, because when I click on constrain the crop, this is where it starts to do things I don't want it to do. So I'm going to click on that. Now look, it's lost all the foreground.
Do you at that point, I always use the Y offset at the bottom to bring back up some of the foreground?
Well, let me just see if I can get rid of this thing. It's decided to, it's lost it now, so I need to do a little control Z to get it back. There we go. Personally, I think I would just nip off into, well, no, I'll go up here and I'll just do a crop. And I'll just pull that into
here
and here to get rid of the white corners. And that's looking better, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, although I wouldn't do it there, I'd have done it in Photoshop, because I can transform the corners and play about to my heart's content, right, and do all sorts of tricks over there. But it does it here, it's fine. Sorry, go on, Graham.
Just at this point, Doreen's come back with another question, and you're on a good picture to possibly use it. Mm-hmm. How in Lightroom do you select a colour for gradient?
Good question. I might have to make that one up.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so here we are. Here's the gradient. There. Good question. So let's see what happens when we click on this thing here. Don't really know. I don't do it in Lightroom. This is the trouble.
You'd have to select your gradient just a little higher first, wouldn't you?
Let me just have a look, see if there's something that actually does it. There's nothing there for colours, not that I can see. I think there must be, but I don't know how to do it, I'll be honest with you. Oh, colour, here we are. Colour down here. Click on something around here.
If you click on the little box,
Should be able to click on that. There's the colour. All right, now then, if we we'll click on a blue up here, and then let's see what happens with that. Let's now check our gradient and put it in from that corner. And then let's try it again. But I can't see that's gone blue, can you?
No. I don't ever use colour gradient. I use there you go. You've just done it by temperature.
Yeah, I can do it by temperature, but then what the disadvantage of this here is it's picking that up, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you notice, it's because I've gone into that area.
Yeah.
But I can still I can always reduce that by making the gradient go across that corner. But again, let's be honest with you, I wouldn't do it there. But that's beside the point. It can be done. That's,
yeah.
I'm not quite sure how it should be done.
Nope.
If I was in Photoshop again, I would just choose a colour gradient basically.
Yes.
And put it in there, but I'd use the sample colour to get it as well. So, I mean, this basic image is fine. There's a couple of tricks I could show you with this one. This area here is particularly dark inside, so what I might do is I might use a radial gradient on that. I'd choose. I don't tend to use many of these things up here. I tend to use these two mostly, dark and light, because most of the time it's with my dodging and burn thing. I'll just sort of hover over that area there, and that's lightened that area. So if we move it off, can you see it's darker? Just slightly, subtly. Now the exposure. Sorry, yes.
Can you just show them by putting your pointer on it where you've put up the exposure slightly by a quarter? Just to
there.
So if you pull it across, that'll show them how that goes light. There you go. So that's how you adjust it, darker or lighter in that gradient.
Yeah. Now again, if you're doing the rotating of the wheel, you're doing it at 0.5 at a time, so you've got quite good control. So once you've done that one, if you now right click on it, you can duplicate it and just move it over to this one here. Then pulling these anchors in, you can do that to it. If you wanted to, you can actually warm it up slightly by just changing the temperature slightly, so you could probably give it a little bit of warmth in there. And similar with this one here, we could give that a bit more warmth in there. But again, whatever you're doing with this sort of technique, it wants to be done subtly. I use it quite a lot in landscapes where I want to change the lighting to sort of draw people through the image. I did one this week about a wind farm I put up at Tetney, and I lightened and darkened certain areas in that to move the eye around. I'm just trying to remember what the image was. I can't remember. I think I've been a bit lax with my filing on that one. I know it's. I can show you the image probably, because the image will be. If I show you that one first, then I go to that one. Now, basically, what I'm doing is I'm taking this natural lighting anyway, and I'm enhancing it. Oops. It's because of reprocessing of that same image. One reason I found out I missed that turbine out on the previous one, so I didn't want that to happen, so I reprocessed it. I brought a bit more life to it, and I've actually, can you see in this foreground here, there's no blue, light blue in that area? And then we'll go to this one. Can you see it's just lightened up there?
Yeah.
That's just putting a very slight lightening area, and this area here has been darkened.
Right.
Can you see that area there? Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to stop the eye going that way. So it's little things like that that I will apply quite often. Depending how fussy I am about the image, whether I want to get really serious about playing with it or whether I'm just doing it for the sake of it. Anyway. So, I don't know where we are, do you?
No, you've just straightened the building up, which was great. Don't know whether you was going to do an effect on that.
We can do some processing on it. Let's go up here. We'll do this manually. Now, look, I clicked Enable Profiling, and it's got none. And that is because this is a Panasonic GH2. If I go back to the library and have a look in the metadata, we'll find that I've been using a Lumix GH2 with this lens on it. So all of these lenses have lens corrections built into them. And sometimes it will come up with none. Sometimes it will come up with built-in. So my Fuji comes up with built-in because it's got all the corrections built into it as well. That doesn't mean you can't do some changes to it. You can do if you want to. You can play silly games. I mean, if you wanted to do something really silly, you could click on Manual, and then you could play with is it this one here? Yes. And you can effectively create a fisheye lens. All sorts of things you can play with, but again, that's playtime. That's not real processing.
Yeah.
So that doesn't need anything on that one. On the basics again. Now it's a JPEG, so you don't get all the options in here. You've only got color, monochrome, or browse. Just leave it on color because you won't make any difference. You can still change this, but only to auto or custom. So I would tend to find somewhere that I think ought to be black. For instance, I think that shadow there probably ought to be a black, so I'll click on there. And can you see that's just warmed the building up a little bit? So if I do Control Z, that's what it was called. And I find that when I'm photographing in bright sun in Mediterranean areas, that the images come out cool. So I tend to warm them up a little bit. And if I don't find it by doing something like that, I will just boost this a little bit later on. But we'll leave that on for there for a minute. It's got some auto applied to it, so we'll just give it auto, and that's brought the black areas in, so we're going to have to get rid of those again. So we can see if it is the shadow. Let's take the shadows down. Forwards a bit that way. Getting rid of some of it, going to have to take the blacks out as well. That's got rid of it, that's fine. I'm happy with that now, that's near enough. Then I would still nip over into Photoshop again, go straight into Photoshop, bring it in as a smart object again. Well, I've got these routines that basically save me a lot of time. Now that's another dodge there. I don't know how many of you use that. When you're enlarging, do you hold the Alt key down and then rotate the wheel?
I just rotate the wheel.
Yeah, so you set it the same as I have.
Yeah.
It's not the default, but that's the way I do it.
Yeah.
It's just set on the wheel.
Yeah.
If it isn't set on the wheel, my advice is go into the settings and change it because it is a real bonus.
It is.
So again here, we'll just click on this thing here, pull up the little processing thing and do it, that one. See what it does. It should bring some nice detail out in the building with a little look. It's still working, don't worry. It'll change the image when it's finished playing about. It doesn't do it in stages. It does it all and then updates it if you like. I haven't done much to it. Anyway.
One of those subtle changes.
Yeah, I'm surprised because that. Okay, so that's where we've got it. So I'll click it off. Oh, it isn't all that. Well, it is subtle, isn't it, when you look at it?
Yeah, definitely there.
So it's there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then I go back into Photoshop again, and it's not warm enough for me, so I'm going to warm it up. So that's all gone out of the way. So I'm just going to give it. I'm going to give it +5. Just one click. That's just warmed it up a little bit for me. I like to get a bit more texture in that area there, so I'm going to give that some texture. I'll stick with the +20, the +15. and the vibrance. These are my defaults, and I'll only change my mind if they don't appear to work. But if you remember the original image, you remember how dark these areas here were? No focus at all. Now we're going to focus on them, haven't we? So there's just some bonus going on there. And it just, it's going to be a heavy vignette, that's too much. Can you see the corners too dark? Medium, still a bit dark. Light's probably enough, you know?
Yeah.
So that would be me done. I don't want to do any more to an image than I have to. And as you say, I seem to have got a style which suits my images.
Yeah.
So that's basically how I work. But again, it's each to his own, isn't it?
It is indeed, and I must admit, I'm the same as you. I have a little process that I go through for the starting options, and then if you feel it needs a tweak, that's when you start doing something different to your normal start-up changes.
I mean, the bonus with this is that if I decided I want to do something different with this image, if I now go back to photo editing, now I might have to think about this one. I'm going to go back into Photoshop this time. Without that, I'm going to edit a copy with Lightroom. Now I'm going to edit original, I think. I get confused at this point, so if it works, I'll tell you. If it doesn't, I won't. I'll come back and change my mind. I've gone to edit original. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Now then, notice I've still got access to these layers here.
Yep.
So I can now change my mind. For instance, if I go into this one, I know I waste a lot of space using all these intelligent things, but it gives me the flexibility to play about afterwards. And that's what I really like to be able to do. Otherwise, I've got to start again and wonder what the hell I did last time. Now, what I'm going to do with this one this time, I'm just going to boost the detail extractor a bit, something silly. It's just gone really gritty now. Yeah, and we'll give it a bit of saturation as well. Be careful with these, because I'll tell you something else now. If you look at that image, to me, it's losing 3 dimensions because it's flattening the tones. And this is something that happens with HDR, so be a bit careful with it. Now, I'm only playing, so it doesn't matter. And when I come back in this, hopefully it'll reset itself. If it doesn't, I've got the settings I require to reset it afterwards. Anyway, so I'm going to click on that and say OK. And then I'm going to go out of here, and it will let me.
Yep.
And say yes.
I think possibly what you're doing, and I do the same, is that possibly people tend to think that they have to edit in either Lightroom or Photoshop, and that this option of what you're doing they possibly don't know about, that you can transfer it from one to the other and then back again.
Yeah. Photoshop doesn't allow you to do it so easily, I don't think. I think there is a way of doing it, but I don't know how to. So I always start in Lightroom because I like the cataloguing in Lightroom.
Yeah.
So I work in Lightroom, from Lightroom to Photoshop. If I want to apply Nick, I can actually apply Nick here. If I go up here to edit in, I've got all the Nick effects there.
Yeah.
But I won't do it there because it works better done in Photoshop.
Yeah.
So I've also got Topaz Studio and I've got On1 effects there, and they're all available to me here. But if I use them here, my hands are tied. If I go and use them in Photoshop, I can go back into them by using this intelligent layer thing.
Yeah.
And I can get back into it and change my mind. And it's all that ability about being able to change my mind without having to start from scratch and try and remember what the hell I did. Because this is what I can't do, and my memory is not that good anymore. It's fairly good for some things, but it's not that good.
We all have that problem, Brian.
Yeah, it's age.
Yeah. Doreen's got another question.
Yeah.
She's put, I find HDR in camera flattens the tones. Should she be processing afterwards to get the tones back?
Does she want the short answer?
Go on then.
Don't use HDR.
Yeah.
HDR, if I can just get on a little hobby horse here, HDR is a very great technique for extending the range of, apparently extending the range of tones you've got in an image. In its extreme, which is, I would class this as its extreme, or not fully extreme, because I've seen worse, but look at the sky, look at it's done to the sky and various other things. I would definitely never ever do it in camera. If I'm going to play with HDR, I would do it in either, I'd probably bring it into Photoshop, depending whether you're going to do multiple images or single image processing. Both can be done. I would take it from here, under the photo bit here, I think we saw somewhere merge to HDR in Pro Photo. I would tend to do it there because I then can mask it down and tone each layer down. HDR is great for bringing out detail. Now, something that you've always got to remember, and this is something that is probably not understood by people, I mentioned 14 bits of information being stored in RAW. Now, unfortunately, your screen can only display 8 bits of data. So you can never see the full range of tones that you can actually create inside your camera. It's always going to be a subset, a smaller color space than you're actually creating it from. And that color space has the same sort of problem with tones. So although you've got 14 bits of data for tones on an image, when you bring it into the screen or onto a printer, you cut it down by 8 bits. If you're going to print it, you've also got another problem, and this is a very much more technical problem. I don't know whether I can show it with this one. Let's just see if I can. If I click on soft proofing, right, I've clicked on something called soft proofing. Now then, this is going to compare the colours in this image with the colours that will be available if I go to a certain medium. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see up here, little printed document. I click on there, and it will show me which images cannot be printed. Now then, if you look down this area here, can you see some red dots?
Yep.
If I click on it again, they disappear, or some of them do. Those colours are out of gamut. They cannot be printed by your printer. So what will happen is the printer will make a decision based on all sorts of things that you have told it, or supposed to have told it, or the software is telling it, what to do about those colours. It'll either say, sod it, I'll print what I like, or it will then change others around it to bring it within gamut. I think there's some up this corner here as well. I think that's some there. Yes, there's some up there. Now, if we go for this one here, the printer one, now there is some coming there. Now, just down this area here, there's a couple of red dots coming in. If you just watch in that corner, if I enlarge that area, now all that blue cannot be printed. Okay?
Yep.
So that's out of gamut at that end. So this is something that you need to learn as you get further into it. I mean, until you get that far, don't worry about it. I mean, I very rarely worry about it, unless I'm doing some serious stuff on competitions or something else, where the colours have to be even more accurate than I'd like them to be. I put a quote in an article I was writing just recently. I process my images to be what I think I saw or what I wanted to see, rather than what the camera saw.
Yep.
And so that makes sense again to people.
Yep.
Hopefully it does. basically I cheat, I suppose you might say. But
Yeah.
that's my way of looking at it.
Do you profile your screen, Brian?
Yep, this has been it's not been profiled recently, but it is profiled. Yes, I use a Color Monkey,
Yep.
which processes my screen, also processes my printer. It's funny because I've got 3 screens. I've got this one on here, and I've got 2 upstairs. I profile them all under the same conditions with the same monkey, but none of them look the same.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't know which one's right. This one's always a bit dark. The one upstairs, I know it's bigger, and perhaps that's one of the consequences of it's a 24-inch. I've got a 24-inch and a 22-inch upstairs, and the 24-inch is always paler than the 22. I don't know whether that's just the fact that it's bigger and it can't generate the colours, or whether it's getting old these days or what. But I must be honest with you, I process most of my work on this machine. I take it upstairs to print on the big machine, and I look at it on there, and I might tweak it a little bit relative to that, because I know that the printer near enough comes out the same as the screen upstairs.
What you see is what you get.
Yes, and I go up to it and I compare the two side by side, and they're pretty damn close. So I can't complain at that. So that's a little bit more about the way I work.
Yeah. Another quick question before we just have a quick break for the members.
Yep.
Do you have to move from develop to library to see the effect of the changes?
No. Down the bottom here. Sorry, there. That's your before and after.
Yep.
And you've got various things on that. If you click on it again, it brings you at top and bottom. There's 4 options. Are you with me?
Yep.
And you use whichever one is best for that particular image. This one's the best one for this one. That's a before, that's an after. Yeah.
It just shows you straight away then, doesn't it?
Yeah. And you can decide which one you prefer. If you think you've gone too far with this one, go back to that one and start again, you know?
Yeah.
No worries. It's just basically it's suiting yourself, and something again you're going to have to get used to is judges may not like what you do, and I'm getting used to that idea myself, that judges don't necessarily like it, and that's unfortunate. I think it's they're missing out, not me.
That's right. You know the old saying, Brian, judges don't know anything.
That's the one. That's why I do a little bit of judging occasionally, just to keep my eye on the side to make sure I don't know anything.
The actual panels at the side, your navigator panel, your history panels, etc. I appreciate you can get rid of them in total, but you can narrow them down. I don't know whether members know that as well. You can on some.
Hover over there.
It depends.
Perhaps you can't on this display.
I was going to say it on some screens you can, on some screens you can't.
It's showing you can on this, but what I've done actually, I've set my text to be bigger than the standard text, so that when I'm doing a demonstration, this text is bigger than normally would be.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is the minimum area. I'll try and do is I'll try and enlarge it. Yes, you see, it'll allow me to enlarge it, that one.
Yeah.
Will it allow me to shrink it? Yeah, it won't allow me to shrink it below there.
Yeah.
So there is a minimum and a maximum.
Yep. No, that's a fair comment. Yeah.
I mean, do you remember the letter F? That's a useful one. Letter F brings it into full screen.
Yep.
And then you've got, and you can change the colours around the outside here. Now, I don't bother. I think the grey is probably the most useful colour. Depends what you're displaying it on. If you want to see what it looks like on white, because you can have a white border around it, then you can change that to white or whatever you want to do. But I tend to leave that.
Can you just click there and just show them?
There we are. So there's white.
That's it.
There's black, medium grey.
Yeah. It's fairly neutral, so.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not colouring anything. It's not having an effect on. I mean, if you look at that is actually having an effect on how you perceive those colours. And then if I click on the white, that has bleached it. Now where the heck did I see this? This was just recent. I read some notes I'd made some time ago. Somebody had given me this information. I was in a book on printing, but on printing I was reading. And the guy said if you want your colours to look saturated, put them on a dark mount. If you want them to look pastel, put them on a light mount.
Yeah.
And if you can see that here, that's gone pastel, relatively speaking. Well, that's gone more saturated.
Yeah.
And it's just perception.
Yeah.
It's not anything right or wrong. It's just the way it is being perceived.
Yeah.
And you pay your money, you take your choice.
One of the members has just put a little note on the chat saying that if you just press L for the night mode, that takes you in as well, and tab for the pick only mode.
Oh, that's learning presets. I mean,
Yeah, that's exactly.
I know some of them. I know Control Z.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I just use the buttons. Right,
Yeah.
what we'll do now, it is 8 o'clock, we'll break for the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
If members could be back, please, for 10 past, so that we're ready for going at 15:15 again, that would be greatly appreciated. So make sure you're back for 10 past. I'll close now, and we'll be with Brian again in another